Well, with the death of Barry Humphries, the lights may be going out in Broadway and across the West End of London, certainly in those theatres where he dominated. But here, closer to home, the lights are going to be going out pretty quick too if the closure of Liddell coal-fired power station, which provides more than 10% of New South Wales electricity, has the expected effect of blackouts and surging power prices. Labor has reassured us that energy supply won't be a problem, that everything will be fine, sure. But history has painted a very different picture when other shutdowns have occurred. Here to give us a reality check here on Team Reality on what the impact of the Liddell closure will be, we're joined by our great friend, Nationals Senator for Queensland, Matt Canavan. Matt, great to see you, mate. You're looking there up in Queensland, looking beautiful. We're very jealous. It's freezing cold and rainy here, but I'll be going into that in Ice Age watch in a tick. Tell us about what's going to happen in New South Wales with Liddell closing.
Well, let's hope, Rowan, we get some of that global warming for you down there in New South Wales this winter, and it's not so cold, because if we do have the kind of winter we had last year, which I think shocked a lot of the scientists because it was actually cold, apparently it's not meant to be cold anymore, but it was last year, you might recall that New South Wales residents were asked not to turn their dishwashers on, to cut back their power use, just to keep the lights on in a developed country blessed with energy resources. Now, it's going to be harder this winter because we're losing, as you've said there, 10% of New South Wales' power supply. A couple of coal-fired power stations that were due back online here in central Queensland have not come back on before the New South Wales winter. So we're in quite a dire straits. Now, if you went to the track yesterday, you probably would have put money on the horses that had good form. If they'd won in previous weeks, you might back them again this week. The problem we've got with these promises we see from the experts that everything will be fine is they don't have good form. The experts have been wrong time and time again about exactly the same thing. Before the northern power station shut in South Australia, they said that there'd be no impact on prices. Within months, South Australia had a statewide blackout for the first time since the 1960s. They said the same thing about the Hazelwood power station, that it wouldn't lift prices. Again, within months, power prices more than doubled. So let's just see what happens here in the third series of this trilogy. I'm very worried, though, about where this country is headed, because we're not replacing the coal-fired power stations with something that's anywhere near what a coal-fired power station can do.
Rita?
I'm interested in Labor's EV strategy. We've had a lot of talk about EV sales going through the roof. Some people in the car industry tell me that's not actually accurate. What do you make of what's happening in that space? And is that the future? Are we going to be all driving EVs within 10 to 15 years?
Well, I think it's interesting, Rita, that even after the Labor Party's thrown tens of millions, I think hundreds of millions, it is costing hundreds of millions of dollars of tax incentives to get people to buy electric cars. That's not happening. So this week they've had to announce that, well, we're just going to force you to buy them. We're going to put in a new carbon tax, we're going to put in quotas and caps on how many non-electric and internal combustion engine cars you can sell. So you have to buy the electric version of these. And this just shows that the problem here with the whole idea of electric cars, and I've got nothing against them. If you want to buy an electric car, go for your life. They're fun to drive. They have some limitations, like everything in life. But the problem with them is that consumers just don't seem to want them. I mean, I can't remember back in the days of Henry's Ford, the government having to subsidise petrol stations or provide, a tax deduction to buy a Model T. I mean, people just went and bought them. And we didn't even have petrol stations there. We had no network, and within decades, the country was littered with petrol stations because people wanted to drive. We didn't invent the wheel by putting a tax on walking. But now apparently we've got to invent this EV by taxing what we already have. I mean, they're just not that much better, so that's why people aren't buying them for the extra.
Sorry, Rita. James?
Well, Senator, I just wanted to follow up on that idea. I mean, one of the things that we keep being told is that there is this huge surge in demand, but for some reason, the electric vehicle makers won't sell them here unless they distort the market to do so. But what it also seems to be, there seems to be a real common thread between this and the energy market and mining and everything else. It's a totalitarian control mindset. By what rights does this government decide it is going to drive industries out of business, whether they are the petrol car industry, the coal industry, the gas industry? All of it seems incredibly totalitarian to me at its fundamental base.
Absolutely. James. This is about control, and that's why the government, or the Labor government in particular, likes these types of schemes. But it is this remarkable argument that somehow the government has to pass laws to allow business to create a market. I mean, if there is demand for electric cars, I can tell you what, car companies would be selling them in Australia because they want to make money just like any other business. But they're apparently now saying they want the government to force people to buy a certain type of car. What's really happened here, James, is these corporate behemoths like Ford and others have under undue pressure from green activist groups changed their whole business model to produce electric cars, and now they're desperately seeking government's help in trying to justify the billions of dollars they look like they've wasted on these investments. Well, it shouldn't be the government's job to bail out companies that make poor business decisions, because you look at the US in Ford, they're losing billions on their electric car strategy because they're just not following the market. And what we've got to get back to here, surely, is why don't we put consumers first? We're putting climate first all the time in some futile attempt to change the temperature of the globe when China's not doing anything. Why don't we put the Australian consumer first, the Australian people first, provide what they want? And I know, talking to people around my neck of the woods, what people want right now is they'd love to be able to get and afford, one of those Rams. They'd like to get one of those cars for the same price they get in the US. How come they're like triple the cost of what you buy in the US? Why can't we get them here at a reasonable price? Why can't we have a government that's trying to deliver for what people want, not what they think everybody else should have?
Now, Matt, I just want to ask you about one of your colleagues, Senator Lydia Thorpe. Now, she behaved badly at a strip club, and they're now kind of suggesting she should be kicked out of the Senate or something or other like that. But I'm confused, because I recall a politician back in around 2005, 2006, sometime like that, who behaved very badly at a strip club in New York. And got complaints from the girls about his behaviour at New York, but we made him Prime Minister. So does this mean that perhaps we're going to see Senator Lydia Thorpe promoted to Prime Minister, if we're to follow the model of previous examples?
Yeah, well, it's a crazy world, James, isn't it? So who would know? Look, I mean, I don't think the Parliament can't kick people out. Only the people can kick them out. And the problem is, if we start going down that road and saying Lydia should be kicked out for what she did last weekend, before you know it, it'll be politically weaponised, and people will be kicked out for spreading fake news or arguing that masks don't work or something like this, right? So I don't support any principle that somehow the Parliament should be sovereign about over who sits in your Parliament. It's your Parliament. The people have to decide. But it's just so unfortunate. What we should have, obviously, is a system where it should be a position of great honour to be a senator, and as a senator you should try and uphold the great gift you've been given by the Australian people with an appropriate level of standards and behaviour. That's obviously not happening here, and we're left with this unfortunate and unrectifiable situation where a Melbourne strip club, who has banned Lydia Thorpe from going, a Melbourne strip club has a higher standard than the Australian Senate.
Rita.
Well, some of us aren't surprised by that, to be honest with you. But I do want to ask you about a very fine senator, Senator Price, who is now our shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister. How do you see the voice debate going? We've had some polling from Roy Morgan saying support's down 7% from December. There seems to finally be a counter-argument to the voice offensive.
Yeah, look, I do sense things are shifting. People are starting to think about it a bit. I reckon at the start of this year, hardly anyone knew what The Voice was. They thought it was a reality TV show. And now people are starting to think about it. So I still think probably the polling is not very accurate, because largely a lot of people haven't thought about it very deeply or don't even know what it is still. So we're going to probably see the polls move around quite a lot in the next few months. It's obviously going to be up to the people in the end. And I think what is really cutting through and what you see and what Jacinta's saying and how she's talking about her family and her Australian experience is, this is the no case here is the case for we are one people. We want to be one people, and we want to be one Australia. And if you support that, you've really got to vote no, because a vote for yes is a vote to divide Australia. And you can see in Jacinta's own family, it's about dividing families who have an Aboriginal father and an Australian or a Celtic mother or something. Any kind of mixes puts a dividing line through us. And that's so different from the 1967 referendum, where that was actually about finally creating and overcoming the initial sin of our constitution, which didn't create one people, which did have disadvantage for Aboriginal people in it. And it was right that over 90% of Australians supported getting rid of that. But now we want to, I think, to honour that result in the 1967 referendum, we should vote no to keep Australia one and united as one great people in this great country.
Hear, hear, Matt Canavan. I said earlier in the show, and I'll say it again, I believe that the Libs and the Nationals now working together against The Voice. Peter Dutton, Jacinta Price, Matt Canavan. There's a great team there. David Littleproud. These are the people we need. You guys can win the next election, so keep on going, because that's what Australia's going to need very desperately in about 18 months' time. Matt Canavan, thanks so much. Always great to chat to you.